once I started, and there was nothing else like it.
What are you holding in your hands now?
These are items that were seized out of Israel Key's jail cell.
Has the public ever been shown this before?
No. These skulls are drawn in blood.
The blood, where do you believe the blood came from?
I think it was Israel's blood.
Israel Keyes is a serial killer who hid his crimes for many years. He was meticulous, he was incredibly bright, and he was incredibly lethal.
And the significance of the 11 skulls, what is that?
We believe that 11 is the total number of victims. I don't think anybody in his family, his friends, his relationships, his spouses had any idea what he was doing.
It gives me the chills to think I had talked to him, had known him.
That's where I got my kicks, I guess, was being able to live two different lives and have no one have a clue.
Unless you heard him talk about the murders, you would not know that he was a serial killer.
With Keyes, it wasn't about a particular victim. It was about a location.
Why did he pick these folks?
I didn't. It was just random.
Samantha Koenig is an 18-year-old girl who was raised and lived in Alaska. She went to high school here. She worked at the coffee stand.
She was a young girl working her job. I'm terrified of what she went through.
So at this point, Samantha she's making coffee.
She has no idea her entire life is about to change in a horrible way.
No.
People never expected stuff to happen to him.
He would wait until he had the victims under control, and then that's when I think the real monster came out.
There's a specific way I wanted things done, very specific way I wanted things to happen, and I have the whole thing planned out. I have everything I need to do it.
He loved to travel.
Every time I'd drive, I'd be looking for places, good places to do stuff.
You'll see locations in Seattle, Gresham, Oregon, Port Angeles, Washington.
He would rent cars, he would drive thousands of miles, he would take people from one state and he would bury them in other states.
San Diego, Tijuana, Salt Lake City, Utah, Cleveland, Ohio, Edmond, Washington, Fort Wayne, Indiana. There are potential victims wherever Israel Keyes traveled.
Do you believe that this weapon somewhere in the United States may have been used to kill someone?
It's possible.
I had big plans for that gun.
We know that there are families out there whose loved ones died at the hands of Israel Keyes. Right now, we're just trying to find them.
In February of 2012, the residents of Anchorage, Alaska were shaken by a frightening mystery.
It basically looked like someone just literally walked out of their shift.
It was the evening of February 1st when 18-year-old Samantha Koenig vanished after her night shift at this roadside espresso stand.
She went to work that day, expecting to go home to her boyfriend and her dad.
Michelle Tasker is a family friend.
Her boyfriend was supposed to pick her up that night.
But that didn't happen. Multiple calls went unanswered. Several hours later, her boyfriend's cell phone lit up with a message from Samantha's phone.
The text messages said something to the effect of, I'm going on vacation, I'm tired, that she was just going away and she'd just left. But we knew she hadn't left. That wasn't her character. So they knew something was wrong.
Something was terribly wrong, and the next day, investigators watched it all unfold on security camera video. FBI Special Agent Jolene Godin soon joined the team trying to find Samantha.
What are we looking at?
This is Samantha. 8 p.m. is closing time, so she's doing all of her normal things that she would do to get ready for closing.
That's when a masked man walked up to the window. He wanted much more than just coffee.
So Samantha's over at the window here. She handed something to the customer. She backs up, and this is where you see Samantha do this. You see her raise her arms.
When you raise your hands like that, it's usually because somebody's doing
Something, exactly.
What started as an apparent robbery suddenly took a darker turn.
She turns the lights off.
Do you think her assailant said turn off the lights?
Yes. At this point, you see an individual jump in through the window.
Right through the window?
Right through the window.
Have you ever seen something like that before?
No. And then you see two individuals walk away. It looks like an abduction.
As the news spread,
Just please help find my daughter.
Samantha's father, James Koenig, went public.
I don't know if my daughter's being fed, taken care of, if she's still alive, if she's getting any sleep.
As time went on, there was a tremendous amount of fear about what happened and who was in our community that could do something like this.
The FBI joined the Anchorage Police Department in looking at family and friends.
Did you have a sense you were getting to know this young woman?
Yes, yes.
FBI Special Agent Kat Nelson learned everything she could about Samantha and the people she knew.
She seemed like she had a very good spirit, like she was a very kind individual, caring about others. You could tell that she had a lot of friends that cared about her a lot.
Samantha's boyfriend was quickly ruled out as a suspect.
There was no obvious lead in this case, and it posed so many barriers for us in the beginning as to where to start looking for her.
10 days after Samantha disappeared, a vigil was held.
Hundreds of people came.
What else can we do?
Flyers, hand out flyers, ask around. If you know somebody who knows something, get them to talk. We just need some sort of, it's that one lead, that one tip that's going to bring her home.
As friends and family fan out across Anchorage to try to find Samantha, the question is, could she also be out here somewhere in the Alaskan wilderness?
Then finally, after 3 agonizing weeks,
That's when the text came in that said there was a ransom note and where to go.
the text to Samantha's boyfriend was as mysterious as her disappearance. It said to look in Connor Park, under pick of Albert. It also said, "Ain't she purty?"
We just got up and just ran, and everybody took off to the park. One of the girls kind of noticed something on the bulletin board. I walk up and there's a picture of a missing dog named Albert, and right underneath is a plastic bag with looked like a clipping and a photograph in it. Didn't touch it. We called the police.
That note contained a picture of Samantha and a long typed out message that talked about putting $30,000 into Samantha's bank account.
That account was connected to Samantha's debit card, which the kidnapper had. And the photo, which has not been made public, was of Samantha holding a newspaper.
I believe it was dated February 13th, so well after Samantha's abduction. So the hope, of course, is that Samantha is alive.
Samantha's dad deposited $5,000 into her account. Several hours later, a man makes an ATM withdrawal using Samantha's card.
He has a covering over his face, dark clothing, he has gloves on his hands. I mean, so there's very little you can tell.
Investigators rushed to the ATM, but were too late, missing the suspect by minutes. 1 week later, another ATM withdrawal is made.
This one is very different. This withdrawal occurs in Wilcox, Arizona.
Nearly 4,000 miles away.
And then a short time later, we have one in Lordsburg, New Mexico, then Humble, Texas, and then Shepherd, Texas.
He's heading east.
He's heading east. We can see that he's moving across the I-10 corridor.
But the suspect had made a crucial mistake. During the ATM withdrawal in Arizona, a white Ford Focus can be seen in the background.
That information was pushed out to law enforcement across that entire corridor.
Then, on March 13th, a state trooper notices a vehicle matching that description in a Texas hotel parking lot.
And a short time later, a man comes out, he gets in the vehicle, and he starts to drive away.
The trooper follows.
And once that vehicle exceeds the speed limit, he has his probable cause to pull that vehicle over.
And when he asks the driver for identification,
He ultimately presents him with an identification card for Israel Keys.
And who the heck is Israel Keys?
Israel Keys was not even on our radar.
that trooper's instincts were spot on. A search of the car uncovers Samantha's ID, her debit card, her cell phone, and a gun, along with a disguise that matched the man in the ATM photos.
At this point, we believe we have our guy.
But now, the FBI wanted to know, what had Israel Keys done with Samantha Koenig?
The race is on because we still don't have Samantha. We have him, but we don't have Samantha. So if Samantha is alive, then we really need to find her quickly.
In March 2012, 2 weeks after Israel Keys was arrested in Texas, he was extradited to Anchorage, Alaska.
At the point, we didn't really know, was he the one who took and kidnapped Samantha Koenig, or was he someone who was just using a credit card that he found?
FBI agent Jolene Godin says investigators initially didn't know what to make of Keys.
What was it like to look into the eyes of Israel Keys?
I spent a lot of time with Israel Keys. You could be in a room with him and it was like you were in the room with your neighbor.
I think I saw it at Walmart.
And then there were other times where the hair on the back of your neck stands up a little bit.
Investigators scrambled to learn everything they could about Israel Keys, the man.
Did he have a criminal record?
I believe he had a DUI, but that was it. No crimes of violence in his history, no sex offenses in his history, nothing like that. He's a 34-year-old man from Alaska who has a construction business, small, kind of quiet life.
Even one of my colleagues at the U.S. Attorney's Office used him as a handyman.
One of your colleagues hired him to do some work?
Sure. This is someone you felt comfortable giving a key to your house so he could go there when you weren't there to fix things.
An Anchorage resident since 2007, Keys lived in this house with his girlfriend and his 10-year-old daughter from a previous relationship. Neighbors say he didn't stand out.
Nothing suspicious at all, except for that he worked hard.
But investigators had suspicions, and one very pressing question.
We started off with, where is Samantha? No one knew if Samantha Koenig was still alive.
Anchorage Assistant U.S. Attorney Frank Russo and his colleagues knew time was of the essence.
He would have been sitting right here.
So they confronted Keys about Samantha.
Once we heard what he had to say, and went from being a very happy day as a prosecutor to one of the worst I've ever had. We ended up hearing a confession.
Keys admitted he had killed Samantha.
So we wanted to find out why he did what he did.
But before he would say more,
one of the lawyers got you this.
Keys began what would become a pattern for giving information.
He wanted an Americano coffee from Starbucks, he wanted a Snickers bar, and he wanted a particular cigar. Ultimately, Keys lays out the entire story of how the abduction of Samantha occurred.
The video of that confession had never been made public before. In it, Keys says he pointed a .22 caliber pistol at Samantha.
I remember asking him, well, why did you pick that coffee cart at that time? And he just simply said, well, it was open late.
Meaning he chose her completely at random. Keys said as they walked off into the night, Samantha broke free and ran.
He chased after her and tackled her. He indicates that his plan is to hold her for ransom, suggesting to Samantha that if she cooperates, he'll release her. She'll be able to go home.
It was all a lie. Instead, Keyes drove Samantha to his home, chained her up in his shed, and sexually assaulted her. Keyes then strangled her to death. Keyes' family, the FBI later determined, knew nothing about the horrors that had just taken place.
He was talking about the murder of this girl like someone else would discuss what they had for lunch.
Within hours of murdering Samantha, Israel Keyes left Anchorage for a Caribbean vacation with his family.
And where did he leave Samantha? Where was she? Where was her body?
Samantha was in the shed at his house.
Keyes didn't return until 2 weeks later. It was then that he posted the ransom note and texted Samantha's boyfriend, knowing she was already dead. Keyes told investigators he had driven some 35 miles north of Anchorage to Matanuska Lake, where over the course of 3 trips, he disposed of Samantha's remains.
He had drilled a hole and went ice fishing in the lake, and he had tied it up with baling wire and weights, and he had placed parts of her body down the lake as he fished. I remember asking him, "Did you catch any fish?" And he said, "Yeah, I caught fish." And I said, "Well, what did you do with the fish?" And he said, "Well, I took them home and ate them." And for me, that just turned my stomach.
It took the FBI's dive team 10 hours to recover Samantha's body.
I remember I was the one who told both Samantha's mom and dad, and that was a bad day.
Koenig family friend Michelle Tasker.
He has a daughter, and you did that to somebody else's daughter. I don't understand.
You have the right to talk to a lawyer.
After talking to Keyes, investigators realized they had a depraved killer on their hands, and that Samantha was likely not Keyes' only victim.
I'm 2 different people, basically.
How long have you been 2 different people?
Long time. 14 years.
And that tells you what?
That he had been a serial killer for 14 years.
Special Agent Catherine Nelson knew every aspect of Keyes' life needed to be examined.
Cleveland, Ohio.
So she started a deep dive into his paper trail.
Cell phone records, financial records, anything we could find out about his background, his travels, anything that would just tell us a better story about him.
It was starting to look like Keyes could have victims across the United States.
We know that Israel Keyes traveled to places such as Washington, California, Wyoming, Texas, Vermont.
We'll get the whole story eventually.
And he teased his interrogators with details of other murders.
I'll tell you about everything, or give you every single gory detail you want.
But before Keyes would agree to do that, he wanted something extraordinary in return.
I want an execution date.
For you?
Yes.
And he said, "I want a promise that I'll get the death penalty. If you do that, then I'll tell you about all the people I killed." What we said is, the more murders you give us, the more likely it is that they're going to want to impose the death penalty on you.
But without a guarantee of death, Keyes was reluctant to say anything more.
So give me something to work with, hold a bunch of your cards back, but give me a card.
Finally, Keyes folded.
All right, I'll give you 2 bodies and a name.
Hey, Israel, how you doing? All right.
Something to eat?
No, I'm fine.
Candy bar or nothing?
They are odd moments to see.
Swear off those candy bars?
Yeah,
It's in the fridge. Tell you I'm gonna eat it.
Investigators casually bonding with their interview guest.
But get him a cigar. You wanna see what we got you over here?
Awesome. Wow, a cigar for nothing.
In some ways, to the outsider, it looked like you guys were in a way befriending a serial killer.
Yeah.
Can you give me like an hour on the internet, maybe?
Sure.
But there was method to this madness, says Assistant U.S. Attorney Frank Russo.
It was just the act that we had to put on when we went in that room. It was just trying to kind of do anything we could to get information.
Israel Keyes voluntarily granted 24 interviews to various investigators in the 7 months after his arrest.
Is it true he could have walked out at any time?
Sure.
FBI Special Agent Jolene Godin.
I think he wanted to tell the story. He wanted to talk about what he did.
Even my own family pretty much as soon as I did it. So.
He enjoyed the rush. He enjoyed the thrill of it.
That strategy paid off when Keyes gave up the names of 2 victims, a married couple more than 4,000 miles from Anchorage in Vermont.
He gave us the names of the people. We wrote them down.
And what was the couple's name?
Bill and Lorraine Currier.
Do your intel guys immediately try to find out if there's a missing couple?
Absolutely.
What do you learn?
Right away that Bill and Lorraine are missing.
And have been missing for some time.
Correct. Bill and Lorraine Currier are a couple that lived in Essex, Vermont. Nothing stands out really about them. They were just kind of living their life.
The Curriers vanished on a night in June 2011, leaving their family bewildered.
We love them both with all our hearts. We're devastated by their disappearance and in fear for their lives.
After interviewing neighbors, police drew this sketch of a possible suspect.
Police say this composite sketch of a man who may have been seen driving the couple's dark green Saturn sedan is a big break.
But the case went cold for nearly a year until Keyes laid out the roadmap of what had happened.
He flew into Chicago and he drove east. He intended on that trip to commit a homicide. He didn't know who it would be yet.
On that trip, Keyes stayed at this hotel in Essex, Vermont. While there, he dug up a bucket, similar to this one that he had buried a few years prior.
So this is just the standard orange Home Depot bucket.
For the first time, the FBI is showing 48 Hours
These are several boxes of .22 ammunition.
the contents of what Keyes liked to call a kill cache.
So he would pre-position these caches, and then when the urge came upon him, if he happened to be in that state, he had his tools of destruction ready to go.
Correct. Or he'd plan a trip to a particular state knowing he already had a cache there. He didn't know who he was going to kill, but he already knew that he had the items there that he needed. We have the silencer for the .22. We have a wood stock for a .22, a plastic stock for a .22, a portion of a .22 rifle, and then we have the drum magazine, the .22.
Had a number of .22 caliber bullets.
That's correct.
You ever seen anything like this in your career?
No.
The cache used in the Currier attack has never been found, but Keyes told the FBI where they could find this, a weapon he had used in Vermont.
This is a silencer that he's actually constructed himself.
With his murderous tools in hand, Keyes went hunting for victims and found himself outside the Currier house.
I decided I was going to look for a house with a couple in it. I was looking for a fairly easy way to get into the garage, and theirs was the first house I found that had all those things.
He just happens to take a walk from his hotel into a neighborhood, and this unsuspecting couple, just living their lives, is about to have a monster at their door.
Yeah.
The monster didn't knock.
He's very quickly in the house. He restrains Bill and Lorraine very quickly.
You just make sure they know right away who's in charge and immediately tie him up.
And then he moves them to their car and he drives them to an abandoned farmhouse that he had scoped out earlier. Keyes attacks Lorraine first. She's upstairs in the bedroom. He had restrained Bill downstairs.
But the Curriers were not going down without a fight.
Bill's yelling for his wife. Bill ultimately starts to break free from the restraints, and Keyes has to go back downstairs in order to restrain him again.
And what happens down there?
There's a struggle that ensues.
So I knew I was either going to have to knock him out or just kill him. He saw the gun, he started to say something, and it just pissed me off, and I just started pulling the trigger.
Do you think this silencer might have been used in the murder of Bill Currier?
I think it's very likely.
Keyes then strangled Lorraine Currier and left the couple in the basement of the abandoned farmhouse.
Did anyone ever find these bodies?
No, a short time after this happened, the house ended up being demolished and it was taken to the landfill. We made numerous attempts at the landfill. It was, I believe, a 10 or 12-week search at the landfill. The FBI was searching in an attempt to find them, but we were not able to recover their bodies.
But as meticulous as Keyes was in covering his tracks, he slipped up.
This is the one item in all the things that we found that belonged to Keyes that actually had his fingerprint on it. There's a perfect right thumbprint for Israel Keyes.
Yeah, right.
No, there is. I don't have the lab report.
Wow. Yeah, I'm impressed. Well, I'm disappointed in myself mostly, but I'm excited.
What other clues had Keyes left behind? What other murders had he committed? Investigators began focusing on his time in Washington State, where Keyes was raised, a place where he would admit to killing at least 4 more people.
Were any of those victims shot? Strangled?
We'll get the whole story eventually. For as far back as I can remember. But, you know, that's where I get a lot of the ideas. Either fishing or out hunting. See somebody in the woods.
To understand Israel Keyes, you have to go deep into the vast, remote wilderness where he was raised, the place where he lived off and on for more than 20 years, Washington State.
How many people in the state of Washington do you believe Israel Keyes killed?
We believe he killed 4 victims total in Washington State.
FBI Special Agents Ted Holla and Colleen Sanders first questioned Keyes in 2012. They have spent 8 years investigating his life and crimes in Washington, searching for more victims.
This is like a horror movie, isn't it?
It's very much like a horror movie.
The opening scenes of Keyes' life took place in a secluded cabin outside the small town of Colville.
He grew up poor. He grew up in a large family. There were 10 children in all, and they kind of lived apart from society.
John, where are we heading now?
So we're heading north out of Colville. We're going to go see if we can find where Israel Keyes grew up.
Just right up here on the right.
John Smith and his wife Desiree knew Israel Keyes when he was a teenager. Desiree hasn't been in this area since she was 15.
Yes, this could be it. Yeah, I remember it being long and steep and kind of headed up the mountainside. And yeah, it was completely impassable through most of the winter.
It was built to be completely off the grid, to be completely isolated from society.
No radio, no television,
no
electricity,
no,
nothing.
The Keyes family attended a church that preached Christian identity theology, a philosophy John and Desiree were also raised on, but have since disavowed.
Christian identity theology is very white supremacist. They come from the perspective that the other races are subhuman.
So with Israel Keyes, specifically, he could dehumanize anybody if they rejected his worldview.
Schooled at home, cut off from the outside world, Keyes was socially awkward.
Very quiet, very loner-ish, standoffish. It's hard to explain how he made me feel, but I felt unsafe being near him.
So one specific conversation about killing a deer, he said that the initial shot didn't kill it, and so when he arrived, he started to gut the thing while it was alive.
This is interrogation audio of Keyes describing himself.
I've known since I was 14 that there were things that I thought were normal and that were okay that nobody else seems to think are normal and okay.
Yeah. But just when Keyes committed his first murder is still an open question.
Whose picture are you holding?
My daughter, Julie Marie Harris. She was 12 years old and disappeared on March 3rd, 1996.
Sherry Odegaard says her daughter Julie, a Special Olympics athlete with prosthetic feet, vanished from Colville while waiting for a ride to church.
Then I went up and down every street in this town and screamed her name.
And there was no trace?
No, there was no trace.
Israel Keyes, then 18 years old, lived in the area at the time. Julie's prosthetic feet were discovered at the mouth of the Colville River. The next year, her skeletal remains were found.
We asked Israel Keyes about Julie Harris and her death, and he said he was aware of it, but that he was not involved in it.
I remember the name, I don't remember the details of the story.
Keyes told investigators the birth of his daughter convinced him to never target children.
Something kind of changed in the way I thought, and I didn't want to do anything that would mess with kids or whatever.
But Keyes' daughter was born after Julie Harris was murdered. 48 Hours tracked down friends of Julie who had never spoken with law enforcement. One of those friends told us she remembers Keyes talking to Julie at the pool where she often swam.
And that Julie ended up giving him her address and phone number. Have you heard this?
No, I did not know that.
Does that sound tantalizing as a possible clue?
Like any other lead that we have, we would want to investigate it fully. We would certainly be interested in talking with her.
People have wondered if your daughter was the very first victim of Israel Keyes.
And I'm wondering that too.
Despite the intrigue surrounding Julie Harris, Keyes claims his first attempted murder came in 1997 or 1998, when he abducted and sexually assaulted a young woman near Bend, Oregon.
It was weird. I mean, she was scared, but also just talking. So it's like about random stuff. I don't know. It was weird. I was just convinced that I had screwed up that time in Oregon because, you know, I let her go.
He indicated he never let another go after that.
Sometime after that assault, Keyes joined the U.S. Army.
Our investigation led us to believe that he was a model soldier and excelled in the Army.
Keyes told investigators he waited until he completed a 3-year stint in the Army before he stalked his next victim.
And you had told us it wasn't long when you got out of the military that you killed somebody, and it was that sort of feeling that you needed to do something. It was hard to resist.
Nia Bay, at the farthest northwestern tip of Washington, is best known as home to the Macaw tribe, legendary whale hunters. Keyes moved here after marrying a tribe member he met online. They started a family.
He lived there, he rented the house out.
Eric Johnson worked with Keyes at the Parks and Recreation Department.
This is his shop here in the blue part.
The blue part, that was his shop. That's where he worked.
Yeah.
There are reminders of Keyes' skilled carpentry all around town, including this structure.
He was a great family guy, a smart guy, gifted carpenter, you know, well-spoken.
An upstanding member of the community.
Upstanding member of the community, yeah.
I would do something, and then I would go back like business as usual and go out with friends, go out to bars. You know, for all the years they've known me, they actually don't know me at all, really.
About 60 miles southeast of Nia Bay is another spectacular location, one of the deepest lakes in the United States, which investigators suspect is also a watery grave.
You guys know about Lake Crescent in Washington?
He revealed to us that one of the Washington State victims was actually, their body was sunk in this particular lake.
I think that lake is 500 to 700 feet deep.
Here's a picture of Israel Keyes' boat.
Sometime in 2005 or 2006, Keyes had a body in this boat.
Any idea who this person may be? Any idea how this person was killed?
No.
How long does a body last in a freshwater lake?
In the last months of 2012, Special Agents Halla and Sanders were hopeful that Keyes would give them more information on who is at the bottom of this lake. But the killer had another plan.
I can't be satisfied sitting in prison for all my life. I'd rather go out while I still have some sanity, good memories. really think I'm gonna feel like when you need more information?
After 7 months of interrogations, 7 months of teasing investigators with bits and pieces of his violent past, Israel Keyes decided to take one more life, his own.
Serial killer Israel Keyes was found dead at the Anchorage Correctional Complex.
We received a call early in the morning that on December 1st, 2012, Israel Keyes had committed suicide in his jail cell.
He used a disposable razor to slit his wrist, and Keyes attempted to strangle himself with bedding.
And what was your reaction to that?
My reaction was a lot of these secrets are going to die with him now.
For Samantha Koenig's loved ones, the news hit like a gut punch.
He should have been executed. Now, he killed himself. That's great. It's not what we wanted. We wanted him to stand trial. We wanted him to answer for what he did. But the world's better off. He's gone.
Inside Keyes' cell, jailers discovered a bizarre, blood-soaked suicide note with passages like, "Crushed like a bug, you still die."
We had hoped that that note was going to be clues and tips for us on, and that he was finally going to give us all of the information on the homicides. And it really wasn't. It was kind of a rant.
But the end of Keyes was by no means the end of this case. A few months before his suicide, investigators found those macabre drawings.
He drew a series of 11 skulls, and these were found underneath his bed in his jail cell.
Drawn in Israel Keyes' own blood.
You have 11 skulls. What does this mean?
I think this is the entirety of his crimes.
And it indicates that there are 7 victims we don't have identified.
Prior to his death, Keyes had pointed the FBI to another victim.
There's one in New York.
He refused to provide that victim's name, but investigators believe it happened when Keyes took a road trip through New York State in the spring of 2009. So they combed through missing persons reports and Keyes' computer.
Is this the person buried in New York?
No.
Her name was on your computer.
Which computer? Mine?
When they confronted him with photos, one in particular rattled him. It was a photo of a woman named Deborah Feldman.
Given the way he looked at it and he started shaking a little bit, I would say she is definitely one of his victims.
Deborah Feldman is a woman who went missing from New Jersey. It was in 2009. Her body has never been recovered. We're relatively confident about Deborah Feldman. However, we do not have any forensic evidence to make that connection.
According to the FBI, that would make Deborah Feldman Keyes' 4th known victim, along with Samantha Koenig and Bill and Lorraine Currier. Agents are now determined to identify the remaining 7. And there are clues that point to at least 2 other states.
Tell me about Wyoming and what was there for him.
The Green River in Wyoming is where Keyes had buried his cashmere.
Is there a sense that there may be a body somewhere near that river?
We have a strong suspicion that Keyes may have a victim located in that area.
In the late 2000s, Israel Keyes also spent time in California's wine country, including visiting the posh Sonoma town of Healdsburg in May of 2007.
Keyes has often talked to investigators about using boats and also kayaks in the disposal of bodies. We know that he rented a single-person kayak in Healdsburg near a campground during that time in 2007.
But Keyes' road trips weren't limited to the U.S.
In 2007, he drove along the Alcan Highway by himself for about a week of that year.
The Alcan Highway goes through Canada up to Alaska.
Yes, correct. We know that Keyes traveled to Canada quite extensively and specifically said that he would go to Montreal.
When he was asked about whether he'd killed anyone in Canada, what did he say?
He said, "Canadians don't count."
It's been several years since Israel Keyes killed himself. The FBI hopes investigators across the country will take a second look at suspicious deaths in their area. They're also hoping the public can help.
If anyone has any information on Israel Keys and his travels, or if they have a family member that they think may have been potentially a victim of Israel Keys, that they come forward to the FBI with that information.
That includes the Lake Crescent area of Washington State, where Keys told investigators he had dumped a body.
We absolutely want people to come forward who think they may have seen something connected to Israel Keys, especially on this lake.
And what about those kill caches buried throughout the country?
If anyone out there comes across one of these, what should they do?
First, for people not to touch too much and not to contaminate it too much, and definitely contact local law enforcement in their community who can then reach out to us.
For the FBI, their focus is clear.
For me, the important thing is Samantha and Bill and Lorraine and Deborah and all the victims that we don't have identified. That's what this case is about.
And their commitment unwavering.
Do you have an optimistic streak that says we can find answers to the other 7 cases?
I do. I absolutely do. And it won't be easy by any means. And it may take a long time, but I'll never give up trying.
The 911 call came in around 10:50 p.m.
County 911.
It's a female hyperventilating.
Okay, calm down. Where are you at?
And then the phone goes dead.
She's pinging on Kenner at 2595. She's extremely out of breath. She sounds like she's running.
That we got first responders arriving to a unmaintained county road, 2595. They don't know what they're getting into as they're going down this dark road in the middle of the night.
38, we're out with that female, 25.
They see a white female flagging them down.
What's going on?
My husband, he went to go help me. My Jeep is stuck in the back around the corner, and he's been shot in the head. Please. Is he okay? I need to know if my husband is okay.
Dispatch calls me on the cell phone and said, hey, I think they need you out there on scene. I'm gonna check her out, make sure she's okay, and then... Yeah.
You want a little bit of oxygen to help you out?
She was just frantic. She had blood on her shoulder area, and it's all over her leg and her shirt.
What's your name?
Chacey.
Chacey? Chacey what?
Poynter.
Tell us what happened.
I heard a shot, and the Jeep started rolling, and I didn't see anything, and I saw a shadow. That's all I saw.
No, was it your husband? What's his name?
Robert Poynter.
Robert Poynter?
Yes, he's a firefighter. That's my husband's blood.
Just breathe for me.
That's my husband's blood on me.
I arrived here right around midnight. So we're walking up with our flashlights. At this point on, you can start making out a silhouette of somebody still in the Jeep.
The Jeep was covered in blood. There was no indication of a struggle.
He's around the corner.
We had a witness, Chacey Poynter, and that there was somebody loose, at large that had killed her husband.
County Deputy 6584.
And I could see Robert. And as soon as that shot, he slumped over into the passenger seat. just wanted him to be okay.
Was he dead or alive?
He was dead.
This is a case about sex, lies, money, and murder.
When I'm awake, I see his face. And when I'm asleep, I see it. It hurts.
And he's been shot in the head, please. He's around the corner.
The harrowing night of September 9th, 2016 is forever etched in the memory of Chacey Poynter.
Calm yourself down.
It's something I can't get out of my head.
And when I walked up to him, I yelled his name, and I just felt something on
When
me.
she says her husband, Robert Poynter, a decorated fire department captain, was gunned down by a shadowy figure just feet away from her on this rural road in Royce City, Texas.
You can see if you look below us, tire treads from tractors, deep ruts. It's a true farm road.
Detective Michael Burke photographed the scene.
The night of the murder, there was still water in the ruts, they were still muddy. It was pretty rough.
It's not even a traveled road. It's for farmers to use to make access to their fields.
That night, Sergeant Shane Meek wondered how Chacey and her husband ended up on this broken road and questioned a breathless Chacey in the back of his squad car.
Breathe for me, Miss Poynter. Calm down and breathe for me, okay? Breathe fast like that. You're not helping yourself, okay? Slow breaths.
Chacey says the couple planned to meet at a fast food restaurant for tacos.
I was gonna meet him up at the Jack in the Box. I don't ever take this road.
All right. What made you come down this one?
I missed my last one.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I did. I've never been down this road before.
She texted her husband.
What do you say to him?
Told him that GPS said that I was 3 miles out.
Chacey says while texting, she got stuck.
I called him after that. I told him that my Jeep was stuck and that I needed him to come help me.
As a fire captain, Robert was used to coming to the rescue. He rushed to her side.
I stayed on the phone with him. He drove out there.
Why did he park there?
He told Chacey that the ruts were too deep and he wasn't going to be able to get his truck down here.
I met him almost all the way down to his truck, and we walked back together. And then he went to go get my Jeep, got on the driver's side.
As Chacey waited on the side of the road for Robert to back up, she heard a gunshot.
I don't think I reacted to the sound. It was Robert. I jumped in the Jeep. It was rolling very slowly. I was holding his head in my left hand, and I put the Jeep in park with my right hand, and I was calling his name. I could see his eyes. I could just feel the blood.
This was a clean assassination. Robert unfortunately didn't have a clue what happened to him. The victim was sitting in the driver's seat. He's got an entry wound approximately right here on the temple.
On the right side of his head?
Yes, sir. And the wadding from a shotgun shell was still in his skull.
And could you tell if that blast was shot from forward of the vehicle or from behind?
It was hard to tell.
Chacey says as she ran for help, she saw that shadowy figure.
There was a man. There's a tall person. That's all I know.
Okay.
He was taller than me.
And what was he wearing?
Dark clothes is all I know. Dark.
Did you see any type of firearm, rifle, or anything like that in his hands?
No.
While sympathetic, Sergeant Meek was puzzled.
That some guy just happened to be standing in the shadows of the trees to step out and shoot this guy point blank in the head with a gun just didn't make sense. All right, well, give me a second. My partners need to speak to me. I'll be right back with you, okay?
I was terrified. I had just watched my husband get shot. And the man that did it was still out there.
But whoever that suspect was, why would he want Robert Poynter dead? Robert was a devoted public servant, a career firefighter.
Honestly, it's one of those things you don't even believe in at first.
At the University Park Firehouse near Dallas, where Robert spent 19 years as a firefighter and later a captain, the pain of his loss is still raw. For his buddies, Jason, Paul, Earl, and Mark.
But every day you still feel this absence.
Yeah, absolutely.
You still miss the man.
No, how could you not? I think of Bob every day I come up here. It burns me up inside. But every time I pass his locker, I get choked up inside. It makes me want to cry. I'm about to cry now.
A firefighter with the touch of a gentle giant.
My last fire with Bob, this little girl, she was crying. Bob took the time, comfort her and tell her we were all okay and everything was fine.
And that's the way Bob always was. Not just that little girl, his girls. His girls were #1 on his list, always, always.
No matter how much help you needed, he was always there.
Robert Poynter had 3 daughters, a 6.5-year-old with Chacey, and from his first marriage, Natalie and Nicole.
The things you miss the most are the simple things, like being able to call him, being able to see him and hug him, you know.
Back in 2008, his 20-year marriage to their mother, Amy Poynter, his high school sweetheart, began to unravel.
Signs started showing up that something was amiss. He was shorter with conversations. He wasn't home as much. There were excuses when he was gone.
Then Nicole discovered her dad had a second cell phone.
That was the initial realization that there was somebody else.
And eventually this other woman, you learn her name.
It was Chacey Tyler Mormon.
Chacey was a 20-year-old working as a nurse aide. She was introduced to Robert through a mutual friend.
From the first moment that I ever met him in person, we were never apart after that.
What was his marital status?
As far as I knew, he was separated.
From what I understand, she continued to go up to the station to kind of let him know that she was interested, and did that quite often.
She pursued Bob. She pursued Bob.
We'd been married 20 years, and here's a young girl that's giving him attention, and I just think that she continued to try and, fill any need and be there.
We started seeing each other in December of 2007, and I was pregnant by May of 2009.
Robert and Chacey were married on December 28, 2009. She was 22. He was 40.
I knew I wanted to marry him.
What is it about Robert that you fell in love with?
He's goofy. He would just make me laugh.
But almost 7 years later, Chacey says the couple's love faded.
And he's been shot in the head, please.
And that night in the squad car, Chacey decided to share her frustrations.
I was young and stupid when we got married. I didn't want to be married anymore. We've been having problems. I was coming to meet him at the Jackson box so we could talk.
What do y'all fight over?
My daughter. He's trying to take my daughter away from me.
Just over an hour after Chacey Poynter held her husband's bloodied head in her hands, she kept giving Sergeant Meek details, not of the shooting,
We're trying to work on
but
it.
of the state of her marriage.
Why would he try to take your daughter away?
Like, what reason did he
Because
give you?
he knows that that's what's going to hurt me the most.
Yeah, her story kept adding all these different twists and turns and pieces of information that just weren't fitting into place of the puzzle.
You're talking about marital problems at a time when your husband's body is still in a Jeep. Why did you go there?
I don't know.
Chacey says 3 years into their marriage, the couple grew apart.
Nothing really set it off. We slept in separate bedrooms. I never felt he loved me like he could have. He loved his ex-wife a lot, and I felt like she still had a lot of him.
According to Chacey, Robert had a temper. He was taking testosterone and steroids to treat low testosterone levels. And Chacey claims that made him violent.
There would just be times, he would grab me by my hair. I could get thrown up against the wall.
This was verbal abuse and physical abuse, is that right?
Verbal, mental, physical.
Robert's ex-wife, Amy, doesn't buy it.
That is all made up. He did get on treatments. He had normal testosterone. For her to say that he had roid rage and all that, that just wasn't him.
So she's lying to me, is what you're saying?
Yes, I am.
When Natalie was 16, she lived with her dad and Chacey for 6 months and never saw him become violent.
So it was useless to try to come to me and act like Dad was some kind of beast.
Did you ever see him slam Chacey against a wall?
Absolutely not.
Natalie and Nicole have told us that it never happened. Are they telling the truth?
No, sir. They've never really cared for me from the beginning. I was the younger girl that came in and took their father.
Chacey believes she had a good reason for not reporting the alleged abuse to authorities.
I don't walk out and announce he's beating on me. I'm not going to do that because it would jeopardize his job.
Despite their problems, Chacey says she tried to keep the spark alive in the marriage.
I don't mean to embarrass you with this, but what is this from?
This was done for Robert. I had a friend of mine who was a photographer, and she did a boudoir shoot for me. He wasn't attracted to me after I lost all the weight. He liked me when I was heavier.
Over a 2-year span, Chacey transformed her body.
The first picture is December, probably about 2013. The second picture was December 2015. I lost a total of 104 pounds. I got up every morning, ran, strict diet, worked out. I pushed myself pretty hard.
Chacey admits she began seeing other men, a lot of men.
When I dropped the weight, I didn't hide in his shadow anymore.
You had confidence.
Correct. I started meeting people. I was going out more. I was doing things for myself.
Natalie accidentally found evidence on Chacey's computer that her stepmother was cheating.
She had left it open on our Facebook, and she was talking to men on there that weren't Dad.
What kind of conversations?
Very sexual and gross.
Natalie says while her father pulled overnight shifts at the firehouse, Chacey often snuck out for hours at a time, leaving Natalie and her then 4-year-old sister alone.
She was never wearing gym clothes, but she always said she was going to the gym. And often my little sister would wake up and she would cry and cry because she couldn't find her mom.
Natalie eventually found the courage to tell her dad about Chacey's cheating ways.
I will stand up for what I know and what I believe in, and that to me wasn't right.
You said what?
I said, I think Chacey's cheating on you.
Deeply troubled, Robert filed paperwork for divorce, but ended up not following through.
He was trying to save the marriage. He had already been divorced once. He didn't want to lose his third daughter and not be able to be with her all the time.
Robert installed a security camera next to the front door to try and catch Chacey cheating with one of her lovers. Then, just 12 days before Robert's murder, the doorbell rang.
As soon as that doorbell rang, I was out that door telling him he had to go.
And off he runs. And Robert knew.
Correct.
I love him. He's a pain in the ass, but I love him.
On the night of Robert's murder, Sergeant Meek had a hunch that Chacey Poynter knew more than she was saying.
Something just didn't sit right.
Chacey, do you mind if I take some pictures of you real quick?
Although she wasn't under arrest, she was read her rights.
All right, look up at me. All right, listen to me. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law.
At a friend's house.
But Chacey kept on talking.
Met friends?
Yeah.
Revealing what she was up to before that fateful rendezvous with her husband.
Whose house was that?
Michael Garza.
Hanging out with someone named Michael Garza.
Are you and Michael Garza dating or anything like that? Do y'all have a relationship?
Yes.
Well, then that red flag goes off. Did y'all have a date? Was it date night?
No, we just hung out. We had sex, obviously.
Okay, what were you saying? I'm sorry.
He's contacted an attorney to get a divorce, and I was okay with that. We've been married 6 years, almost 7 years.
Investigators say the more Chacey Poynter talked, the more she seemed like a suspect than a grieving wife.
We don't meet up.
The hyperventilating's now stopped, and she's gone into this stutter talking.
I don't know.
Which leads me to believe that she does these pauses.
And so I told him
to gather additional thoughts.
So are you thinking, is this a performance?
Yes, sir. It started seeming more and more that way.
And a performance with a recurring character, Michael Garza.
I was at Michael's house. At Michael's house.
And tell me his name again, I'm sorry.
Michael Garza.
Michael Garza.
Yes.
Y'all have a relationship?
Yes.
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 Michael Garza, who is he?
He was a place that I would go to vent, and I loved him for that.
Chacey began having an affair with Michael Garza after meeting him on Facebook in the summer of 2016. This selfie captured one intimate moment.
It was something I felt guilty about.
Robert shared his frustrations about Chacey with his buddies at the firehouse.
And I told him, man, you just got to cut your losses. Divorce sucks, but you're miserable. And he said, yeah, you're right. You're right, but I'm invested. Those were his exact words, I'm invested in this.
Robert was hopeful the marriage could be saved. He took Chacey and their daughter to Mexico on vacation, but it backfired.
We fought. He thought I was on the phone with somebody else. It upset him.
It was the Wednesday that Bob had come home from Mexico. He said the trip wasn't good. He said, I just can't do this anymore.
And when did he die?
On Friday.
Not long after Chacey told Sergeant Meek about the affair with Michael Garza,
I'll be transporting the female to Roy City Police Department.
She was driven downtown to be questioned by Detective Michael Burke.
Let me get this door. 68. Just have you sit right there.
The interrogation started at 2:20 in the morning.
Did I love Robert? Yes. He was an ass to me. I loved him.
And lasted 8 hours.
I loved him. I really did love him. We've had a lot of issues in our marriage.
Among those issues, her affair with Garza.
Michael and I ended up having sex before I was there.
And she gave more detail about Robert's murder.
Right to the front of my Jeep, there was someone standing there. Probably 6 foot, maybe. I could see dark clothes. That's it. I don't know if they were white, black. I don't know anything.
Somebody, from what you're saying, shoots your husband, cold-blooded murder, and just lets you run away.
There was someone standing there.
When somebody comes out to murder a random stranger, a big red flag is that they don't let a witness go.
And that suggested what to you?
Suggested she might have known the killer.
Look, the way your husband was killed, somebody was right next to him.
Detective Burke pressed her.
I think you're full of crap. I want her to pull the trigger.
I don't know who pulled the trigger.
See, I think you do, and that's the problem.
No, I don't.
2 hours into the interrogation, Detective Burke broke through.
Who killed your husband? Who shot Robert? Can you say that louder for me, please?
Mikey, as in Michael Garza.
Where was Mikey?
To the passenger side.
Now cornered, Chacey changed her entire story. She says she told Garza about Robert's alleged anger issues.
I didn't want him dead. I wanted him to know what it's like to be bullied all the time.
Chacey told 48 Hours Garza rode with her that night. The plan was to confront Robert outside the Jack in the Box and demand he leave Chacey alone.
Did you see him put a shotgun in your vehicle?
No, sir.
You never saw a shotgun?
No, sir.
How can that be true?
I was on my phone. Garza tells me, make a right onto County Road 2595. When I asked him what was going on, he said, he's gonna meet us here.
Chacey now claims it was Garza setting a trap.
He told me to take my Jeep back up around the first corner and let Robert know that my Jeep was stuck and I needed him to come help me.
You had to tell Robert something to get him to come to the location, right?
Yes, sir.
But
my Jeep wasn't stuck.
when Robert arrived, she noticed something kind of touching.
He wore the cologne that he wore on our wedding day, and he hadn't worn it since. And I had made a joke about it, and he laughed.
Robert could never have imagined that he was just moments away from death.
As I was walking to the Jeep, I said, "Stop!"
Who are you yelling stop to?
To Garza.
But why would you have shouted that way if this was just going to be a conversation between two men? Isn't that indicative that you shouted stop because that meant don't shoot him?
No. I didn't, at that point, I didn't want him to even talk to Robert. At that moment, sorry. At that time, there was a gunshot.
Did Garza say anything to you?
Nothing.
County 911.
Not until after I called 911 did he run up to me, and he took my phone from me when he threw it down on the ground.
Prosecutor Jeff Kovach doesn't buy any of it.
The question is, which one of those stories does she want us to believe? Hurt him, scare him, or just have a talking to? None of them are credible.
Investigators believed that you were luring your husband to this remote area so he could be murdered.
There was no plan to bring him out and murder him. There was no talk of that.
On September 10th, the morning after her husband's murder, Chacey Poynter was arrested for conspiracy to commit murder. The couple's daughter would stay with Chacey's mother.
Did you conspire to have your husband murdered?
No, sir.
You're telling me that you are speaking the truth?
Yes, sir.
Investigators then set out to find the man who allegedly shot Robert Poynter. But Michael Garza, the truck driver, had hit the road.
The funeral was absolutely beautiful. It was very ceremonial.
On September 15th, 2016, just 5 days after his wife was charged in his death, Captain Robert Poynter was laid to rest.
We had guards guarding his urn, his ashes the entire time.
Firefighters from all over Texas honored him.
Did the fireman's prayer.
When duty calls me, O Lord, wherever flames may rage, give me the strength to save some life, whatever be its age.
I remember trying to hold it all together, and then when I lost it is when we walked out.
Other fire stations and police came in and they lined from the church all the way to the fire station.
I remember the bagpipes. Painful. One of the hardest things is they give the last call for Robert Poynter. You still think that person's still there somewhere, that this couldn't have happened. That's the thing with Bob. You always had this underlying feeling that even if he had to walk through fire, somehow that man would make it through.
Amy says in the last days of his life, Robert was finally ready to walk away from Chacey.
He was kind of beaten down. He was tired, where he was just ready, to get a divorce. I think she knew he was ready to move on.
Investigators say just the day before he was gunned down, Robert had reached out to a divorce attorney on Facebook, sending this provocative message: "I'm thinking of a surprise attack."
And he said something to her about a surprise attack on me. He had contacted a realtor, said he was going to put the house up for sale. He was going to have custody of our daughter.
The next day, he is killed. Do you think that's just a coincidence?
That's not a coincidence. That's why the murder happened when the murder happened.
What was the attraction for Chacey with your dad? Was it love or money?
Money.
Natalie says Chacey had convinced her father to change his almost $685,000 life insurance policy. Instead of the girls getting the money, Chacey was made the primary beneficiary.
We believe that was the motive. She saw him as an ATM machine, and she was going to milk the last little bit of money she could get out of him.
Prosecutor Calvin Grogan says investigators discovered a mountain of digital evidence.
There were plenty of text messages after the life insurance beneficiary designation change occurred in April, indicating that Chacey Poynter was looking for somebody that would take care of Robert.
And many of those texts, more than 10,000, were between Chacey and her lovers.
She's having affairs with multiple men: Danny Mims, Brad Golden, Sean Butcher, Michael Garza.
Prosecutors believe Chacey began grooming Garza for murder, convincing him that Robert was an imminent threat.
She used sex to manipulate men. She's not going to come right out and ask them, "Hey, will you kill my husband for me?" Chacey Poynter plays the victim, and then she uses that to manipulate people. And so she told all of these men that she's this abused, battered woman.
She texted Garza from that Mexican vacation where the couple was to reconcile. Quote, "He's coming after me sooner or later."
Garza answers, "F him. No, I will shot that dude." Is Michael Garza talking about murdering your husband?
I didn't think he was serious. I didn't want him involved. I told him that.
I'm telling you, man, this girl is good at what she did.
This is Brad Golden.
She would be at my house every day, around 4 to 5 o'clock.
He's the lover caught on the security camera video. He says Chacey manipulated him.
I never even suspected, boy, never that she had been married. She had told me she'd been divorced since 2014.
Brad says Chacey told him horror stories about Robert.
She always told me that Robert was abusive to her. I don't know if she was trying to get me to feel sorry for her, and I just wasn't falling for it or whatever, because I kept trying to get her to me to the police station,
Were you ever able to corroborate any of her story of abuse?
We spoke to neighbors, we spoke to friends. I mean, there was no evidence to support it at all.
Chacey had made allegations about Robert's anger issues to ex-lovers, Sean Butcher and Danny Mims, who she often texted.
8 days prior to the murder, I wish she'd run out of air in a fire. Moving back to July 11th, I need him gone. Gone, G-O-N-E, all capitalized.
Danny Mims replies, "I'm not a magician." Chacey answers, "Well, I need one."
Did you want him dead?
No. I was upset.
Sean Butcher says to Chacey, "What do you need to leave?" Chacey Poynter says, "I would be better off with him gone. Benefits and can't lose custody."
Investigators have said you were going from person to person to try to find someone who would kill your husband.
I wasn't.
The day before the murder, it's from Chacey to Garza. I've made up my mind.
What do you think she's made up her mind about?
I think it's pretty clear it's about killing Robert Poynter.
With Michael Garza on the run, a SWAT team raided his house. Coming up empty. But the next day, Garza turned himself in, and he was charged with Robert Poynter's murder.
He did not want to speak to us, only wanted to speak to his attorney. And that's as far as we got.
With their two suspects now behind bars, investigators hope to find direct evidence linking Garza to the murder. 5 weeks later, that evidence would come from a farmer.
What's your emergency? I believe I found the shotgun.
Who unearthed the murder weapon while plowing this field. Less than a quarter mile from where Robert was shot.
That shotgun was still loaded. The shell hadn't been ejected. Okay, and there's 2 more in the magazine. And they're all man-killing slugs, consistent with what the medical examiner said was used to kill Robert Poynter.
We did a search on the firearm.
Mossberg 835 Ultimag.
It came back to Matthew Garza, Michael Garza's brother.
Police now had what they needed. Michael Garza would be the first to face trial.
Michael Garza just happened to be the person that was in Chacey's life at the right time. And all it really took for Chacey is to basically just dangle the bait.
And then when I looked up, there was nobody there.
Okay.
You probably think I'm crazy.
From her bizarre performance the night her husband was murdered to her confession about her lover, Michael Garza,
Michael was going to shoot Robert.
He was going to do it.
investigators were convinced Chacey Poynter was determined to have her husband killed that night.
He's around the corner.
Correct. Investigators believe you knew about the mission, planned the mission to murder your husband for money.
That's what they say.
And look at me. They're right, aren't they?
No, sir.
On July 10th, 2018, the prosecution put the alleged triggerman Michael Garza on trial. He had pleaded not guilty. When Garza took the stand, he made a shattering announcement, implicating Chacey.
He says that he gave her his brother's shotgun because he thought that she was abused. He implied that she did it.
Garza told the court he couldn't have murdered Robert Poynter because he was tending to a sick animal on the family farm.
His alibi is that he was tending to Oreo the cow while this whole murder was going on.
The jury didn't find Garza's alibi credible.
I actually do believe that his testimony helped us.
On July 20th, Michael Garza was found guilty and sentenced to 99 years in prison.
It was a huge step forward, but it also felt like the real battle had just begun.
The Poynter family now focused on Chacey.
In my mind, she's always pulled the trigger because she was the instigator of all of it.
What were you thinking going into trial?
I was very hopeful.
Prosecutors were hopeful too that they would prove Chacey wanted Robert's money and that she was the mastermind.
There's no way Michael Garza was ever going to get Robert Poynter out on that road alone. Only Chacey could do that, and she played her part well.
Using Chacey's texts, prosecutors demonstrated that her alleged love for Michael Garza was really a sinister ploy.
He is a pawn. He's the dumb idiot she got to do this.
In fact, Garza didn't know that after he shot Robert, Chacey planned on spending the night with another lover.
She was texting Brad Golden while she's out there committing this murder. She had sex with Brad Golden that morning. They still planned to meet up that night.
What the heck is going on?
I don't know. My life was out of control.
Chacey's defense attorneys, Scott Cornaud and Frank Hughes, say the state's obsession with Chacey's affairs tainted the jury.
Chacey having affairs has nothing to do with murder. It just demonizes her. Chacey Poynter is not guilty of murder. She's guilty of being negligent because she should have anticipated that this thug, Garza, would commit a murder to get to her.
Calling 911 is probably the strongest point that we have in her defense. No one who planned to kill someone would shoot him and call 911.
He went to go help me. My Jeep is stuck in the back.
But the prosecutors argued at the sight of her dead husband, Chacey had a moment of sheer
He's
panic.
around the corner. Like,
It's one thing to talk about killing somebody. It's another thing to go through with it.
While Chacey chose not to take the stand, jurors did hear her speak
he knew that I was seeing someone. And
through those recorded police videos.
I didn't want to be married anymore.
One that captured this revealing moment. At the end of her 2-week trial, the jury began its deliberations.
We waited for a while. Hour, 2 hour, 3 hours went by.
After the 4th hour,
hey, okay, they have a verdict, okay.
Chacey Poynter was found guilty of murder.
I cried and relieved.
They got it. That they saw who she really was.
She met him, and she walked him to his death.
Smiling and giggling, talking about tacos and cologne. She's evil.
Chacey told me that you always had Robert's heart.
I think that's true. She took away all choice of anybody of having any relationship or any, future with him.
This is his bunker gear. Having it is almost like having part of his presence, which is comforting in a way and painful in another.
How do you want your father to be remembered?
As he was, as he really was. He was gentle and he was smart and he was kind. He was rare and we were lucky to have him.
This is injustice.
True redemption and remorse comes from telling the truth. Isn't it time you did that?
He wasn't supposed to die.
Jurors sentenced Chacey Poynter to life in prison, with the possibility of parole in 30 years.
Are your tears now tears of what you did to your own life, or tears of what you did to him?
It's both.
We all live two lives. Only the most intimate people that we know really know who we are.
911, do you need police or paramedics?
Paramedics.
It begins with a 911 call from the house.
It was a Sunday morning, November 13th, year 2016.
What's the address of the emergency, sir?
It's Talega in San Clemente.
Talega is a new community. It's kind of considered a sleepy little town. Nice place to work, nice place to live.
And what's happened?
We got a patient here who's fallen off stairs, and I don't have a pulse, and she's cold.
Eric Scott Sills is a fertility doctor.
So you found her down at the bottom of the stairs?
Yeah, partially on the stairs.
Susann Sills is his wife.
Looks like her shoe come off or something.
The mother of twins, a boy and a girl.
So she's not breathing?
No, she's not breathing.
She was the one who was found that morning.
I'm going to give you instructions for chest compressions, okay?
They had it on a speakerphone, so Scott and Mary Kate, the daughter, were both heard on the 911 call.
What are you trying to do, sir? I can't see what's going on. What are you doing? CPR.
I'm doing the CPR.
Dr. Sills was an infertility specialist.
Keep going. Okay, just this way.
They ran their clinic as partners.
Susann took care of all the business side of things.
Continue the compressions until paramedics arrive and take over.
She's making noises out of her mouth.
She was his #1 supporter in everything that he did. They really looked like they had it all.
Okay, hold on. We're doing it. Oh, baby, come on.
She was making some kind of noise just from the compressions, but I think she was already dead.
We get notified by our sergeant to come out to a house and begin a death investigation.
So when you went inside, what stuck out to you?
Well, as soon as you go into the front door, the stairwell is right off to your left. Susann was right there. She had a blanket covering her body.
We could see the other things laying around, like this stainless steel soup pot, a purse, an empty medication bottle.
And then the scarf was a little bit further down away from her. The deputy coroner, during her preliminary body exam of Susann, the injuries weren't consistent with somebody falling down the stairs.
Her neck had a pretty pronounced ligature mark.
The question is, how was she strangled?
When she was found,
The scarf was around her neck.
I think the first day there was mention of dogs maybe pulling on a scarf.
Oh, you're so good.
They had a couple of dogs, rescues. Mary Kate saw the dogs pulling on the scarf.
We didn't get the impression that it was any kind of violent pulling.
Do you think that the dogs could have pulled on her scarf hard enough to strangle her to death?
Could they do it? Yes.
When you came to the house, it was a death investigation. By the time you left, was it a murder investigation?
No, it wasn't just as clear-cut as that.
Do you have a spidey sense when you go into these scenes?
I'd like to think so. Probably all of us would like to think so, that we could just figure it out as soon as we walk in, Sherlock Holmes style.
On that Sunday morning in November 2016, Orange County Sheriff's homicide detectives Eric Hatch and Dave Holloway had more questions than clues.
At that point in time, that morning, November 13th, was Scott Sills a victim or a suspect?
To us, he was a victim. We were going to a house where 2 kids and a husband just lost their wife and mother.
Dr. Scott Sills had made that 911 call and reported finding his wife and business partner, Susann, at the bottom of the stairs.
Is it a steep stairway?
Yeah, it's pretty high. I believe it was 13 and a half feet from the floor to the top of the stairs.
Did it seem plausible that a 45-year-old woman in pretty good shape would have fallen down the stairs to her death?
At the time, it sounded believable.
Susann had injuries to pretty much her whole body. Her face was all bruised up, her back was bruised up, both arms and legs had bruising and abrasions.
And around her body was that odd collection of items.
They definitely stood out, especially that steel pot. It almost looked like it was placed there. It wasn't upside down or leaning against anything.
We had to figure out why those things were there.
The detectives say Dr. Sills didn't seem nervous that a homicide team was in his home asking questions.
He was just kind of going with the flow.
How cooperative was he?
Oh, very. Everything we asked of him, he gave us.
He signed a consent form that gave us permission to search his house.
And when they interviewed the Sills children, Mary Catherine and Eric, the 12-year-old twins, each told a similar story to their dad, that Susann had not been feeling well that night.
Susann had a history of migraines. They were typically debilitating, requiring a dark room, quiet, and bed rest, and she had been suffering from a migraine that weekend.
The migraine seemed to explain that large pot.
Sometimes she carried around a bowl in order to have it near her bedside in case she threw up in the middle of the night.
And the empty pill bottle was for a pain medication Dr. Sills said his wife took to treat her migraines.
So did that make it sound more possible that she could have fallen down the stairs because she was suffering from a migraine?
Maybe.
And there seemed to be nothing in the couple's relationship to suggest another reason.
What did you learn about the Sills marriage?
According to Scott, everything was fine. They had a good relationship.
Both children attested that their parents loved each other and said they rarely argued and were never violent. Detectives started piecing together a timeline of the weekend.
Saturday night, she was on the couch. Eric came down to see her, check on her, make sure she was okay.
It was around midnight when Eric said he and his mom went back upstairs after she put the dogs away in their crate. Mary Catherine had gone to bed in her parents' bedroom. Susann was going to spend the night in Mary Catherine's room, which was the quietest.
It was Mary Catherine's idea for Susann to spend the night in that room. It was clean, according to Mary Catherine, and done up like a little hotel suite for Susann to convalesce in there.
Mary Catherine had left a note on her door with what would be her last words to her mom. "I know you are tired," she said, "but you need to know that I love you." Around 4 a.m., Eric said he woke to the sound of his parents arguing in the next room.
The two windows, that's Eric's room.
So Eric is right next to Mary Catherine's room where his mom was.
Yeah.
And what did he tell you he heard?
Well, he heard loud voices arguing, but he didn't describe hearing any physical confrontation.
Eric told detectives that after about 5 minutes, he decided to go sleep in the main bedroom with his sister. According to Mary Catherine's statement, she thought he'd come in around 3:40 a.m. and told her their parents were arguing about a work email.
How do you know she got an email?
Because Eric said they were talking about that.
Oh, okay. So Eric told you that she got an email and that it was about something
about work.
Dr. Sills told detectives he had argued with Susann because he found her working late on her laptop, which made her migraines worse.
When you heard that they had an argument shortly before she was found at the bottom of the stairs dead, what was going through your mind?
Well, again, that's one more piece of data that we're going to collect. It doesn't mean one way or the other that it was a murder, but that's definitely an avenue that we would have to pursue.
Neither Eric nor Mary Catherine heard their dad return to the bedroom.
I woke up and my dad was just on the covers, just laying there. There wasn't enough room to get in, I guess.
Yeah.
So he just was laying there.
on top of it.
Yeah.
It was around 6:30 a.m. the next morning when Dr. Sills and the twins woke up. He asked them if they wanted to go to the pool and get some donuts. Mary Catherine said when she left the bedroom and looked over the banister, she saw her mom's body at the bottom of the stairs, that long red and white scarf around her neck.
That was Mary Catherine's scarf. It was found in the same room as Susann's body.
But the scarf wasn't on her body.
When we arrived, it was not. Mary Catherine told us that she had to remove the scarf, and she did that not to impede Mom's breathing.
Adding to the mystery were the injuries to Susann's neck the deputy coroner had noticed during a preliminary examination of the body earlier that morning.
Especially with the ligature mark across her neck. It just didn't make sense.
Is it possible that she could have fallen down the stairs and then somehow the scarf strangled her?
Could have caught on a banister? Sure, I suppose so, but we didn't have any evidence of that.
As detectives continued their investigation, the questions mounted.
Did anybody in the house hear a fall down the stairs?
No, nobody described hearing a fall down the stairs or If Susann had been carrying that stainless steel pot, no one heard that bounce down the stairs or land on the tile floor. There was no evidence on the stairs of someone going down, like broken ballast or anything like that.
And something else the detectives thought was strange.
It was a warm day, even though it was November. But when we spoke with Scott, and during the whole time we were in the house doing our investigation, he was wearing a beanie over his head. And he said that he slept with it because it was cold.
Did you ask him to remove the beanie?
Yes.
As it turned out, Susann wasn't the only one with injuries that morning.
We discovered that Scott had some injuries. He had a cut up here on his forehead, and on his arm he had a bruise.
Dr. Scott Sills said there was a simple explanation for the injuries. He had hurt himself while working on his car in the garage with his son Eric. There was just one problem.
Eric told us Dad didn't hurt himself.
Did he say to you, I left the garage, so maybe you hurt himself while I was gone?
No, he told us they came in the house together.
And investigators said they found something Dr. Sills couldn't explain on that day.
You found blood?
Yes.
Blood in Mary Catherine's room, where Susann had been staying, on the curtains, the wall, and the nightstand.
So that morning, when you asked Scott about the blood, what did he say?
He didn't know where it came from. He was unaware of it.
Mary Catherine told investigators the room was, quote, perfect when she left it. She also said she'd turned down the bed, but now it was made.
It didn't really make sense. Why would Susann take the time to make the bed in the middle of the night?
So if you found blood in Mary Catherine's bedroom, you know that there are ligature marks on Susann. Why not take him down to the station at this point and question him?
Once you arrest somebody, that starts processes that you can't stop. Besides the blood in the bedroom, we didn't really have enough evidence of a fight occurring. So at the end of the day, there wasn't enough probable cause legally to arrest him.
Susann's autopsy 4 days later didn't provide any definitive answers. The forensic pathologist noted that Susann had injuries all over her body that could have resulted from a fall, including a fractured C3 vertebra near the base of her neck, which can be fatal. Then there was that ligature mark across her neck and hemorrhaging of the blood vessels in her eyes, which pointed to strangulation. It would take months to make an official ruling.
It's not something they want to rush into. It's not something they want to make a rash judgment on. The doctor wanted to examine the whole case more clearly.
In the meantime, detectives requested DNA testing on evidence collected from the Sills home and forensic analysis on Susann's phone and laptop. They also dug deeper into who the Sills were.
None of their immediate neighbors knew anything about the family. Eventually, we contacted whoever we could out of their contact list to try and find out more.
In high school, I thought, this must be what genius means. His humor, his quick wit.
Sandy Roberts and Jamie Akins have known Scott Sills since their high school days in Harriman, Tennessee.
He was something we had never seen before. In a small town in Tennessee at that age, he was very special.
He was hilarious. I mean, people come to class in a three-piece suit, and it's not dress-up day.
He's flamboyant, he's bigger than life. He was very, very kind.
I grew up pretty poor. I didn't have a car in high school or anything like that, and a lot of times no lunch money, and he always pulled out his wallet and paid for it. It just wasn't a question.
His future seemed limitless. He was accepted to both law school and medical school.
We were kind of all on the edge of our seat, wondering what he was going to decide to do.
And it was no surprise when the hometown boy became a renowned IVF specialist, a profession that would lead him to Susann.
Susann was going through fertility treatment, trying to get pregnant with her first husband.
Chris Solimini met Susann Arsuaga in business school, where she earned an MBA. She had confided in him about her struggles to get pregnant.
Having kids was everything to Susann. She'd cry about it. I mean, it was so important to her. And Eric Scott Sills was her fertility doctor.
But soon, Chris says, they were a couple.
She started talking about Dr. Sills after she had told me she was getting divorced and that she was now dating him. I just remember her saying he's a brilliant doctor.
Dr. Sills, who was also coming out of a previous marriage, seemed to have met his match.
Susann was smart, witty, sarcastic, but not in a mean way, you know, just enough to dig at you. You know, incredibly driven, a loyal friend.
She was so classy, so beautiful, very engaging.
Seemed like to me he found one that it was a good fit.
Susann fit right in at Scott's 20th high school reunion.
She danced the whole time. They were lovely together. He just seemed really happy.
The couple married and welcomed twins through IVF, adding to Dr. Sills' 2 older kids. And eventually, Susann's business acumen would lead them to start their own IVF practice in April 2015.
She started the business and she built it. Susann pretty much ran everything with the exception of actually doing the procedures.
The practice soon took off.
We actually have Dr. Scott Sills here, an OBGYN who's also a fertility specialist.
And Dr. Sills was often featured on the TV program The Doctors, which was distributed by CBS.
We've decided to provide you that removal surgery at no cost.
He was, in many eyes, a saint. He was loved by his patients.
Dr. Julio Novoa is an OBGYN who co-authored a book with Dr. Sills.
Dr. Sills was a great doctor, and Susann was a great advocate for women as well. And they were a team, not just married, but a team, and working well together.
But about a month before her death, Rick Leeds, another of Susann's friends, says she left him a troubling message.
She sounded like she was whispering. It was so different from the happy, jovial, excited voicemails I got before. This one was definitely, things weren't good.
When they spoke, Rick says it sounded like there was tension over a photo.
She said it was a topless photo of her that had appeared on a blog. This was some discussion she didn't want to have.
When news of Susann's death reached her friends, they were stunned.
It was devastating.
I couldn't believe it. It didn't seem plausible to me that she just fell down the stairs with a migraine headache.
It didn't sound like the vibrant Susann they knew. Dr. Sills' friends say they were equally perplexed.
Scott would not discuss anything with us.
He quickly changed the subject. We never spoke again. You don't know how tragedies affect people.
What were your impressions of Scott Sills throughout the investigation?
I would describe him as emotionless. He never acted as though Susann was even his wife. He talked about what a good manager she was and how she kept their business flowing, but he never once mentioned that she was a good mother or that he loved her.
All very businesslike.
Yeah.
In fact, the day after Susann's death, the doctor had gone to work.
I was shocked at who goes to the office the next morning when your wife died.
Joni Ricker's daughter was a nurse at the Sills IVF clinic and had called her in a panic.
She said her patients are on cycle and they have to be treated.
Joni volunteered to help manage the office, something Susann did, and ended up working there for 2 years.
Did Dr. Sills talk about his wife?
Oh, never.
Did he ever say how she died?
Oh, it was never discussed.
Pretty soon, she says, the doctor started changing his appearance.
He started to dress like a movie star. I mean, he was very simple before.
And she says the once balding doctor now had a full head of hair.
We definitely noticed new hair.
They also noticed Dr. Sills' flashier online persona.
I said to one of my friends, now is Sills a doctor or a model? I personally don't know any doctors on social media that are taking selfies in the gym and their blazers and their sunglasses and in their Porsches. I mean, it was a little much.
All of a sudden, there started to be another woman in photos, and he was out on dates, and they were going around town.
The behavior raised eyebrows, but it was hardly evidence. Then, in November 2017, a year after Susann's death, there was finally news from the coroner's office. Susann's cause of death was cited as ligature strangulation, and the manner, a homicide. Dr. Sills was now the prime suspect. DNA results on the blood in Mary Catherine's room showed a mixture of his and Susann's DNA.
They were both there.
There was a fight.
There's a fight, and he killed his wife.
On August 8, 2018, nearly 2 years after Susann's death, Detectives Holloway and Hatch made a surprise house call at the doctor's home.
Did you ask Dr. Sills at this point, just flat out, did you kill your wife?
Yes, and started stressing out and started sweating, and he became more defensive.
They say the doctor denied killing his wife, and he now offered an explanation for his blood in Mary Catherine's room. He said he had injured himself replacing a window screen.
Wouldn't Mary Catherine have seen the blood that he left from replacing the screen?
For sure.
And she didn't mention it?
Nope.
Despite the death being ruled a homicide, detectives said they still had more investigating to do, like finding a motive. A search of Susann's phone provided some clues. Text messages hinted at problems in the marriage.
There was one in particular where she had some pretty strong words towards Scott.
In text sent in late August, less than 3 months before her death, Susann wrote, "I am trapped. You are killing me. I just want out. And we just aren't right for each other." And about a month before her death, Susann had confided in Rick Leeds.
She and Scott were in a really rocky place, and she was thinking about leaving him.
He said Susann was also upset about a photo she'd posted online.
Whatever was going on between her and Scott, and this picture was just a pivotal point for her.
Susann had posted a topless photo after making a bet in a political chat room called Patrick.net.
Susann apparently was one of the few women who was involved in this forum. She kind of threw out that if Donald Trump won the presidential nomination, that she would post a picture of her bare breasts.
And on the day of her death, detectives had found a printout in Dr. Sills' home office of an exchange between Susann and another Patrick.net member from August 30th, 2016, discussing the photo. The man, who went by 10-Pound Bass, wrote, "All I've got to say is you must have a super cool husband." Susann, aka Turtle Dove, replied, "He's exhausted, actually. It isn't easy being married to a woman who is partially naked and posing alluringly all the time." Dr. Sills denied that he had printed that chat, but when investigators later searched his phone, they found a photo of the same exchange.
Does this sound like this could lead to motive?
Yes. If it's something that's building up in him, some kind of anger or jealousy about what his wife's doing online without him.
Enough to kill her.
Mm-hmm.
Detectives also learned that Dr. Sills had tried to collect on a $250,000 life insurance policy on Susann, but he claimed the insurance company had called him.
He wasn't able to collect because that death certificate was ruled as a homicide.
Do you think Scott Sills thought he'd gotten away with it?
I think so.
Every day that went by, he felt a little bit more at ease, I think.
On April 25th, 2019, nearly 2.5 years after Susann's death, Dr. Sills was arrested for her alleged murder on his way to surgery. He quickly posted a $1 million bond, but investigators were about to get an unexpected tip from a woman who said she had met Dr. Sills while Susann was still alive.
They met through Facebook. He was infatuated with her.
She shared an email Dr. Sills had sent her about 2 weeks after Susann's death.
Pour ma chère Marie.
Yes.
So it's in French. This is probably the most important manuscript I have ever written. I am asking you to seriously rethink our suspended but once intense relationship. When you first read that email, what was your reaction?
I thought, I was shocked. This is a motive.
So could Dr. Sills have killed his wife to get her out of the way?
Oh, I just don't see that at all.
Dr. Sills' defense attorney, Jack Early, denies that there was a romantic relationship. And he says that email was merely a devastated father's desperate attempt to find a new mother for his children.
Did you feel in your gut that you could win this case?
Oh, yes.
In November 2023, just over 7 years after Susann Sills' death, Scott Sills, now stripped of his medical license, went on trial for her murder. The Orange County District Attorney's Office declined our request for an interview, but cameras were allowed in court for portions of the trial, where Senior Deputy DA Jennifer Walker laid out her case to the jury.
November 13th of 2016, this man killed his wife and hid it.
Walker argued that Scott Sills beat and then strangled Susann to death before staging the scene to make it look like she'd fallen down the stairs.
This is a murder, not an accident.
The prosecution's case relied heavily on Susann's autopsy, but Scott Sills' defense attorney, Jack Early, came to court armed with a unique theory. He suggested that Susann fell, either going up or down the stairs, and that one or both of the family dogs then tugged on the scarf that was wrapped around her neck.
Do you honestly think that the dogs pulled hard enough to strangle her to death?
No, I didn't. That was not the main theory, that the dogs actually strangled her to death.
Instead, Early focused on another injury identified in Susann's autopsy, that fractured C3 vertebra. He says that injury is consistent with a fall and that it would have left Susann incapacitated.
Let's assume that someone trips and falls and fractures their C3. Their breathing is compromised. If they're then choked, it doesn't take much to kill them.
The defense had the scarf tested for dog DNA. It came back positive. And there was testimony that the dogs were known to play tug-of-war, as seen in this video. And when Susann and Scott's now 19-year-old daughter, Mary Catherine, took the stand for the prosecution, her testimony supported the defense's theory. Investigator Dave Holloway was at the trial.
Mary Catherine testified that she saw the dogs pulling at the scarf around her neck, and none of that came up during the day we interviewed her the first time.
How did that strike you?
Well, I know that she was still close with her father.
Do you think she's trying to protect her dad?
I would say so.
Early denies that. He says the reason Mary Catherine didn't tell investigators is simple.
It wasn't asked. Why would she think the dogs are important? She doesn't even know that there's any question of being choked.
He says Scott Sills did tell first responders, and he argued that Susann's toxicology tests point to an accidental fall. She had a muscle relaxant and pain medication in her system, and Early told the jury that Susann suffered from a fainting disorder and that vertigo would accompany her migraines. But the prosecution said the defense's theory just doesn't make sense.
Strangulation is a silent killer. You know what's not a silent killer? Falling down multiple stairs. You have to believe she bounced her head, neck, back, shoulders, inside her arms, legs, and feet, multiple ways against approximately 6 stairs, like being in a soundproof pinball machine. Then was strangled by her dogs. Not reasonable.
And why would Susann have a scarf around her neck that early in the morning to begin with? prosecutors suggested that Scott Sills used it to strangle her and then left it around her neck to cover the marks. But Early told the jury it wasn't unusual for Susann to wear a scarf, especially when she wasn't feeling well.
Because if she got sick, that was something that she would wear a scarf to wipe your mouth with it.
But the prosecution also pointed out that Susann and Scott's son, Eric, told investigators he saw his mother put the dogs away in their crate in the hours before she died.
Eric said that his mom put the dogs in the crate.
Yes. Sometimes dogs, when they're crate trained, when they go to bed, will go lay in the crate, even with the door open.
There was also no blood on the stairs or damage to them.
There are all these injuries that you say come from the fall down the stairs all over her body, but she leaves no marks on the stairs.
But there's no marks anywhere in the house.
But there was that blood in Mary Catherine's bedroom, and the prosecution argued it was evidence that a fight occurred. A forensic scientist testified that the stains on the nightstand and drapes were consistent with Scott Sills' DNA. Early did acknowledge that his client's blood was in the room, but he told the jury about Scott's claim that he hurt himself there on an earlier date.
From Scott replacing a screen?
Yeah, from getting cut on a nail that was in the back of the nightstand that was there.
That forensic scientist, though, testified that one of the stains on the wall was a mixture of DNA, and Scott and Susann were likely contributors. Early says that doesn't mean it was Susann's blood, and that it could have been her touch DNA that was picked up.
Susann had touched that area before at some point in time, and she lived there.
But the prosecution pointed out that there were also clumps of Susann's hair found in Mary Catherine's room. And there were blood stains on Susann's clothing that were found to be consistent with Scott Sills' DNA, too. Early had a rebuttal to it all, starting with the hair.
She has hair extensions. And you know what hair extensions cause? Loss of hair.
And the blood on the clothes?
You don't know how old it is.
The jury was also shown pictures of those injuries that were observed on Scott. Remember how he told investigators that he hurt himself while working on his car with his son? And how, according to investigators, Eric said that his father didn't get injured? Well, when Eric took the stand, his testimony allowed for the possibility.
What he testified is, well, I didn't stay there the whole time he fixed the car.
Does that seem like a discrepancy to you?
Well, it's not a discrepancy. Nobody's asking him that full story at the age of 12.
So he didn't necessarily say at age 12, Dad didn't get the injury from the car.
No, he basically said, I wasn't there when he got the injury.
While Eric Sills did testify that a loud discussion between his parents had woken him up shortly before his mother's death, the defense told the jury that there was nothing to it. And those texts between Scott and Susann in the months before Susann's death?
If you have 40,000 texts and there's 5 of them with hard language in it, that's a perfect marriage.
The jury didn't hear about the life insurance policy, that email Scott sent to another woman, or his social media photos in the wake of his wife's death. But they were told about the Patrick.net posts. And the prosecution argued that topless photo that Susann posted on the site enraged Scott.
It wasn't a big deal.
It's not striking to you that he had this photo in 2 places, on his phone and then on the printer?
No, first of all, I don't know really who printed this stuff up.
Early maintains there is no motive for murder.
There was never any physical violence. Their working and marriage relationship, everybody looked at it as loving.
Scott Sills chose not to take the stand. The trial spanned 3 weeks, and then the case went to the jury.
My heart was just pounding.
What do you make of the defense that the dogs may have played a role in her death? Chat now with the 48 Hours team on Facebook and X.
Jurors Aaron Ellis, Jack Van Camp, and Susan Blejo say that when deliberations began, they felt the pressure.
It's just so intimidating that you got someone's life on the line.
It weighs on you.
Oh, yeah. And the ripple effect.
The kids and
Yeah. Did you think about that these kids didn't only lose their mom, that if you convict him, now they're losing their dad.
Of course.
Yeah.
They say they also felt a clear motive was lacking.
I mean, it's hard to imagine why something like this
Somebody would do that.
Yeah.
After about 3 hours, they came to a decision.
The jurors have indicated that they reached a verdict in this matter.
The clerk read the verdict.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Eric Scott Sills, not guilty of the crime of first-degree murder. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Eric Scott Sills, guilty of the crime of second-degree murder.
Guilty of second-degree murder. Scott Sills, who gave the gift of life to so many through his IVF practice, now convicted of taking the life of his wife, the mother of his kids.
I just felt sad. I mean, I was tearing up on the way out. This whole family had been through so much, you know. Now this is the next phase of it.
But he did that.
The jurors we spoke to say that no one on the jury bought the defense's theory about the dogs.
The dogs would have to choke her on the stairs, and my dog was as big as hers. And my dog cannot get a grip on wooden stairs with their nails to do anything. They just slide.
The scarf had no puncture wounds either. I would have expected holes.
And the fall down the stairs wouldn't create that scenario on her body.
Instead, what they spent the most time grappling with was whether Scott Sills was guilty of first-degree or second-degree murder. First-degree murder requires premeditation and deliberation.
I just didn't think he planned it.
I don't.
And if he had planned it or done any kind of forethought, it wouldn't be a hot mess crime scene that it was.
It was kind of like a snap.
But investigator Dave Holloway says while Scott Sills may not have planned his crime, he certainly had the time to think about what he was doing.
He had plenty of time from when he applied pressure to Susann's neck till she died to stop what he was doing. He still did it. I was a little disappointed that it was a second degree.
On March 15, 2024, about 3 months after the verdict, court reconvened for sentencing. Susann Sills' mother, Teresa Neubauer, addressed the court and kept the focus on her daughter.
She was a dynamic person. She had hopes and dreams.
Hopes and dreams, Neubauer said, that one day Susann would see her daughter, Mary Catherine, walk down the stairs of the family's San Clemente home on her wedding day.
It was a very painful thing for me to learn of the role the staircase eventually played in real life.
Mary Catherine also addressed the court and spoke of all the loss she had endured at such a young age. She and her brother were taken in by a family friend after their father's arrest, and that family friend died suddenly of a health condition around the end of the trial. She asked the judge to show her father mercy.
I want my father to walk me down the aisle at my wedding someday. When I have a family and children, I want my father to be there to hold my baby. I have been left orphaned, and I feel so lost without my parents.
We're here for sentencing on the matter.
Judge Patrick Donahue sentenced Scott Sills to the mandatory sentence under California law, 15 years to life in prison.
Good luck, sir.
His fate was decided, but for so many, questions remain. Exactly what led up to Susann Sills' death?
Do you think we'll ever know exactly how it happened?
I don't think so.
No.
Scott Sills declined our request for an interview, but in the end, no explanation will suffice or ease the profound sense of loss that lingers. Patients now without their doctor.
Thousands of women felt him to be a saint, from the saint all the way down to the devil. That's how it ended up being.
And children without their father or their mother.
Her kids were so important to her, and everything she did revolved around her children. She was an incredible human being. You know, I miss her.
Need more time with 48 Hours? Go deep behind every true crime episode with first-hand accounts from 48 Hours Investigations.
Were you at all prepared for what happened in this case?
Shock is the word that comes to mind.
Get inside the twists and turns and get in on the case. Listen to Postmortem from 48 Hours, now available wherever you get your podcasts.